Welcome back. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. From Greenland to windmills, US President Donald Trump spoke for over 90 minutes at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Right on cue, he opened by thanking both friends and enemies. The core message, however, remained firmly America first. Trump revisited familiar themes, calling the 2020 election results rigged, praising his tariff strategy and pointing to what he called strong markets and low inflation in the United States of America. One issue he returned to repeatedly was Greenland. According to Trump, only the US can ensure its security. He also accused Europe and the European Union of taking undue advantage of America, reminding the audience that the US had returned Greenland to Denmark after World War II. Unsurprisingly, the president again claimed he helped stop 8 wars in a single year, including between India and Pakistan. China came up briefly, mostly in the context of wind energy and AI. The speech also marked Trump's one-year anniversary in office, an occasion he made sure did not go unnoticed. So let's open up this discussion. How do we dissect the speech? The main focus of the speech, of course, the moot point being that NATO should give up Greenland and allow America to take control of it. I am being joined by Major General Dhruv Katoch. Let's hear it from you, sir. And what do you make of the speech? Do you think it's persuasive enough for NATO and Europe to hand over Greenland to America?
Thank you, Megha. Megha, I think, it's going to be a very complicated situation from now on. But the point is very simple. If NATO hands over Greenland to the United States, NATO is finished. And if they don't hand it over, I have a feeling that President Trump will take it by force. Nobody can stop him. So now NATO is in a dilemma, but in either case, I think NATO is not going to function the way it used to function. And that opens up a completely different geopolitical game. It is going to be the stronger the power, he can do what he wants. And that is one. Number two, it is not just NATO. I think it is also related to what is happening in Venezuela and what is happening in Iran. So when you take these three combined together, the entire ambitions of the United States are put up on line. When he takes Venezuela and Iran, in a sense, he's checkmating China also. Megha.
Okay. I'm also being joined by Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador Kapoor, let's hear it from you with regards to the situation as it stands now. Do you really think NATO is going to disintegrate if Trump forcibly takes control of Greenland? Or do you think the Europeans do not really have a choice but to accede to Trump's demands?
Well, it's poised on a very delicate tipping point currently, and how the parties ultimately move ahead from here is going to decide the future of NATO. So we cannot predict either way, in the sense that NATO as a force to reckon with is already very, very diminished. Because after US-Ukraine war, after their sort of problems with the US, after whatever they have tried to do elsewhere, and the funding issues initially where President Trump asked them to raise their defense expenditures, which some of them started doing. So it has been going through a crisis of identity and existential crisis also in a way. So if I think there is some push towards acquisition of Greenland by force, because lots of territories have been exchanged like this in the past, a lot of areas and territories have been acquired by the US. Alaska was taken over by the US from Russia for a price. Similarly, huge tracts of land from Mexico have been acquired. And a lot of, French areas, the British areas were all taken over by different means for the coming together of the country called America, including the land of the Red Indians, the native Indians, who were eliminated almost to the point of genocidal sort of impact, where there are very few were left. So it has had a very checkered history all through in terms of acquisition, but we have not seen that for the last many decades, or I would say about a century practically, such a sort of step being openly announced. This time It's something where he's been saying it since the time of version 2.0 that he is planning to do this. And now there are also reports here that there may be offers of $1 million to each individual in Greenland, or each family in Greenland, which would mean payout of, with a population of about 50,000 in Greenland, which is very small. So the total amount of payouts will be limited to below $60 billion if you multiply that to 1 million by that number of people. So whatever way they calculate it finally. Now, for a family to get $1 million suddenly out of the blue, maybe another way of tempting them to go with America. So let us see what happens. There have been other exchanges of territory in different continents, but
then,
I'm just focusing on the US.
At the end of the World War II, establishment of United Nations, following the rules-based charter, is America aligning itself to the charter that it or the entire world is asked to uphold itself with the United Nations is the question. Ben Aris also on the telecast with me. Ben, the situation over here, while there have been certain leaders from Europe who have been very aggressively defending the sovereignty of Greenland, including Mark Carney, including Emmanuel Macron, who made the speech earlier in Davos, even the European Union President Ursula von der Leyen, we have not heard any strong, harsh comments against America or Donald Trump from Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, or for that matter from Keir Starmer, who was not even present at the Davos summit.
You put your finger on the key issue here is the UN Charter signed in 1945, the basis of the international rules-based regime that we're supposed to be living under. And under the UN Charter, which the US is a signatory of, that you cannot do this, that Greenland is a sovereign territory, and there's no justification, no threat, no attack, nothing by Greenland on the states that would justify an annexation, which is what we're talking about. But I think we have to step back, and we're all talking here about possible military action. I think that's actually unlikely. Another problem with this is to do that, effectively, America would have to declare war on Denmark in order to annex this territory. Trump, the president, does not have the authority to declare war. That is only Congress can do that. However, Trump does have the authority to do military operations. And so Trump puts himself, ironically, exactly into the same space as Putin with his special military operation. And that's why it's called that, because Putin cannot declare war on Ukraine. That's in contravention of the UN Charter, which Russia is also a signatory to. So Trump's in a position where he's going to have to march some soldiers in there as a security operation. And the irony here is it's exactly the same as what Russia's doing. And so Trump and America has gone completely rogue. I saw this morning, articles referring to America as Europe's former ally, that it would be an attack, as the general pointed out, by one NATO country on another NATO member, which would be the end of NATO. Article 5 becomes meaningless. So this is all catastrophic. However, as I said, I think we're taking as the base of this discussion, of all the discussions at the moment, and the reason why Macron is not commenting yet is that we're assuming it's a military operation. I think that's actually highly unlikely. I think Trump is a businessman, that he's coming in here with this extremely aggressive opening position, threatening to annex the country by force, and that I think the negotiations will now start, and that some deal will be done. I mean, Trump alluded to the rare earth metals. He played it down, saying they were buried under ice. That's no problem at all. And that's actually what he's interested in. And if you look at his foreign policy, all the peace deals he's done, I think there's 8, of 6 of which had mineral deals attached to them, starting with Ukraine, that all the support to Ukraine began with Trump forcing them to sign away concessions to their rare earth, their critical minerals. And I think the same thing is going on here too. So all the Europeans, they're in a nightmare position where they're going to have to sanction and tariff the hell out of America if it invades. But what they're expecting is a negotiation to start, and then some deal may be done. And as I think the ambassador was pointing out, if you offered every Greenlander, and there's only 57,000 of them, $1 million to change sovereignty, they may well do it.
Yeah.
$1 million is a million
But also, do you think that different standards apply to different countries? When it comes to Greenland, Europe talks about the International Rule-Based Charter of the United Nations. But when the same thing happens to Venezuela, they are all in cahoots in supporting America.
Yeah, well, there's double standards down the road, isn't it? I mean, like I say, I mean, nobody's turning around and calling Trump another Putin because, as I just explained, Trump is proposing to do exactly the same thing to Greenland that Putin did to Ukraine. And then when Putin did that, he got hit with 30,000 sanctions, the most extreme ever. And here, everyone's actually not saying anything, are they? They're being very quiet. They don't want to get drawn into it. So there is double standards. I think just the suggestion that Trump would do this already destroys the international order. We did a piece this morning saying that Trump is systematically undoing the international order, this new peace council that he's proposing to be a conflict resolution mechanism. We've already got one of those. It's called the UN, and 93 countries belong to it. And Trump has now, whatever it is, 20 candidates, and countries like Belarus have already signed up to it. France has said it won't do it. Sweden, Norway won't join it. But what he's trying to do is set up a parallel multinational organization for dealing with the world's problems, which he's in charge of. And moreover, that he remains the chairman and has the veto over any decision. So it's basically I don't know, a dictatorship, a fascist regime, whatever you want to call it, all those nasty words, with Trump. And he's dismantling the world order.
I'm also being joined by Professor Madhav Nalapat. What's your view on this? And particularly, are there any consequences that the United States of America or President Trump will have to face? Because it doesn't seem like it, because he went out, on a rampage, putting tariffs to the tune of 50%, 100%, 200% on countries, and they all seem to have obliged. They have been coerced to do as Trump says. So that gives him more gumption and the liberty to go out and make absurd demands, and not just demand them, but actually execute them, whether it is the Board of Peace that he has created with him at the helm of affairs, or for that matter, annexing Greenland.
Look, Megha, this so-called international order does not exist in practice. Countries that are more powerful flout it regularly in their own self-interest, or what they perceive to be their own self-interest, and this has gone on right from the end of the Second World War onwards. So we're talking about something that is a figment of imagination. Unfortunately, the UN Charter is not a holy text that has to be followed. It's basically a collection of good things to be done, which good people will do. But frankly, countries act in their own self-interest, and they may not do that. Donald Trump is effectively saying, look, I want Greenland. I don't want to go to war, but by short of war, I'm going to work on any other means. I want Greenland. And the Danes are so ungrateful. For the last so many, 100 years and more, the US has done so much for them. And all he's asking for in return is a small piece of ice. That's all. How ungrateful can you get? And then, frankly, the Europeans, I don't know what they must be thinking as they watched Donald Trump. But the reality is, many of them would have felt like walking out, but then that would have immediately given rise to some more tantrums against the citizens of those countries whose citizens have walked out. So they all remained rooted to their seats. But the reality of the situation is, this is, as has been said, a nightmare happening to Europe in front of their eyes. It's not a nightmare. It's not a dream. It's reality. And here's the President of the United States saying, well, look, either give me what I want or else. You've heard of cowboy westerns, or you've heard of the old stories in which you basically say, I'm making you an offer you can't refuse. But the reality situation is, Trump believes he has the right to Greenland and is not asking for much. And if anybody is opposing it, obviously they are ungrateful people. Look at all the US has done. As for his own 1 year in as president, he has been doing miracles. He has been, prices are coming down. I thought they're going up. Jobs are booming. I thought they're falling. I mean, America is now uh, respected throughout the world. I don't know if that's entirely the case. But again, Megha, I'd like to point out that what the Europeans are confronting is something which they have inflicted on the
Okay.
poorer countries, especially the colonial countries, when they ruled over them. And now it's happening to them in real time, and they probably can't get over the shock of something happening to them, which they have done for so many decades to so many countries. Oh, and in fact, not decades, but centuries. So, all I want to say, this international order, so called international order, any of us can point to 20, 30, 100 instances of flouting of this order. So, essentially, we're talking about a construct that does not exist, and President Trump is being very open about it. He's
Okay.
acting,
Yeah.
as you said, rogue, but the reality is he's acting precisely the way other actors have done, who are more powerful and who have basically attempted to browbeat and bully the underdeveloped countries.
Okay.
Mega.
Okay. All right. I'm also being joined by Sumit Peer. Sumit, are there any positive takeaways, if any, that can benefit the global south in this situation?
I think, Megha ji, the only positive takeaway when we look at, what could possibly balance the global south is keep out of this big boys club. Do not get intermingled into it. Do not go and take anybody's war. Do not take any position. I think the only thing which we can do, or which anybody should do, is say that is it impact our national interest or not? If it impacts, then we go and say. Because in today's world, what the order seems to be today, there's nothing called morality. There's nothing called right and wrong. Right and wrong is what is determined by the people who are powerful. What is determined by the people who are really who can really execute it. America is a unique country because if you look at Russians, they're a military superpower. China is neither. But the Americans are a military superpower. They're also an economic superpower. Now, here's a man who takes out both the swords like a gladiator and he wants to fight with both the swords, which might not have been the norm. But okay, military doesn't work, I'll push you economically. Economic doesn't work, I'll push you militarily. That is what he is trying to say. He has made his ambitions pretty clear. And if you look at, for example, Greenland, forget the minerals, forget the oil and gas, forget whatever is there. If you look at it today, look, Arctic has $15 trillion of wealth under it. There are numerous surveys which talk about it. Greenland only is around $4 to $6 trillion of that. Now, if you look at the Russians, 40% of the Russian coast is Arctic. Today, 20% of the Russian GDP is driven by the Arctic energy, which they harness all year round. The players are Norway, which is a player with some icebreakers. Russia is number one with 60 icebreakers. China is trying to come up. Though when Trump met Putin in Alaska, he offered him, I want to buy 9 nuclear icebreakers and I have $18 billion earmarked for it if you want to sell it to me. So Norway is not a threat, but China was definitely trying to get into the act. So it is not a hypothesis when we say China is one day going to take that. And if we have $15 trillion there, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of wealth. Imagine 150 years back, if somebody would talk of Saudi Arabia, it will be all desert. You could argue, or even a camel cannot get water there. What are you going to get there? But if I would have got Saudi Arabia, I would be the richest man in the world, though it looked all the desert there. So what happens 50 years, 30 years down the line, we don't know. And when we talk of these minerals and oil is below so many feet of ice and all, that's a good thing to talk. But talk at Russians, they're already running it 24/7. All 365 days a year, there is technology to do it even today. It might not be the best, but it still works. Look at the LNG 1, look at LNG 2. Where are they? They're on the Arctic side of the things. So beyond national security, you're looking at future energy stocks. You're looking at future mineral stocks. You're looking at future rare earth stocks. And then sovereignty is the challenge, because why is China, who is in the South China Sea, what the hell does China got to do with nuclear icebreakers? What is China's motive to buy those icebreakers? Where in China you have the ice anywhere? They don't have ice anywhere. What are they going to do with them? Obviously, they're eyeing this part of the world.
Okay.
So if you want to have a China there, it's any day better in the United States of America there. That is for the Europeans. And last point, Meghaji, the point here is it's not about, for Europe, I will be very candid, it's not about Zelensky. It is not about Greenland. It is not even NATO. What you have to really worry about the way European Union is behaving. Can you keep the European Union together or not? Because people like Germany, people like Brussels, and people like Italy have already started towing their own lines. As a matter of fact, if the Union disintegrates, and Trump on record has gone, European Union was built to dismantle America, and Euro was built to screw the dollar. Sorry, I'm quoting Trump. That is what he said. To screw the dollar, and I am going to settle it. So, do you want that his dream to come true, or will you still reconcile to the present situations and act which is in your best interest?
Okay, all right. Keeping all that in mind, Dhruv Katoch, then do you think there is a deal that can come? There has been an invitation that has been given to Trump by Emmanuel Macron to come to Paris over the weekend and sort this out. Can it really be sorted out? And can it sort out until and unless the NATO members bow out?
Megha, I think it's going to be very difficult to sort out this particular problem because you see, while Madhav Nalpat is right when he says that the big powers have always done what they wanted, and that was the world order. That is the truth. But at that point of time, it was a bipolar world, and Europe was united. You had the North, and the global North, as we can call it. The entire Western powers, they were united, and they would do what they wanted, but together. Now the fight is within Europe. It is Europe on one side, or part of Europe, or the Western Europe on one side, and Donald Trump on the other. Now that fissure is going to have a ripple effect elsewhere also. Even if they manage to resolve this issue of Greenland, the fissures which have been created are not going to be over. I think there is a very deep distrust now of the United States. And because of that distrust, a few things are going to happen. One of which is, I see very quickly, Japan is going to go nuclear. I've got absolutely no doubts in my mind, because if the Japanese don't trust the Americans for security, they will need that nuclear umbrella to resolve any issues with the Chinese. So it's going to be a very complicated world, but I don't see any easy solutions coming out of what is happening now. Megha.
Okay, quickly getting in Ambassador Kapoor as well, and talking from the context of Europe and its relationship with America. If NATO disintegrates, which other country is Europe going to rely on, keeping in mind that it has been heavily funded militarily as well as financially by America to keep going?
So if we look at the evolution of Europe since World War II, what happened was the Axis powers, which was basically Germany, Japan, and Italy, were on one side, and the Allied powers, which included the Russian Empire at that time and the Western world, were together on the other side. Thereafter, the Marshall Plan was started, whereby the development of Europe started in a very significant way, funded primarily by American funds. And America also benefited tremendously from that because of increase in trade and increase in rules-based order and increase in control. And American became the dominant power in the world. Now, over time, the NATO kept on expanding its boundaries towards Soviet Union, in spite of various assurances to the Russian and the Soviet Union in particular that they would not do so throughout the history of expansion of NATO. That came to a boil when they finally sort of were discussing about even including Ukraine in the European Union and subsequently in NATO. Because if you see the geographical map, Ukraine is the second biggest country of Europe after Russia, and it has a biggest border with Russia. And if you are in Ukraine, as we have seen, drone attacks can take place in Moscow and in the far reaches of Russia quite easily. So for Russia, it was an existential threat for Ukraine to be tipping over towards NATO and European Union. Mm-hmm. So they had to act the way that they did. I'm not justifying their action, but if I am a Russian and I see my geostrategic interest, then I have to attack Ukraine at that point of time to protect my future, because there are plans here, of course, in the intelligence agencies and in the different files which are not accessible to the people about how Russia has to be broken up into so many different countries. And Russia is the biggest country of the world even today, spanning 11 time zones. And if it had Alaska as it was earlier a part of Russia, it would have been more than 12 time zones, maybe 13 time zones would have been Russian, this thing, which means more than half the world length it would have width it would have spanned. Now, Europe and US, yes, once they sort of were working in tandem, they were able to impose their version, their narrative of the rules-based order, etc., and they could do whatever they wanted, bypassing the UN coalition of the willing, etc., etc. Gaddafi. There are hundreds of examples, and the US by itself also. In my career as a diplomat and ambassador, I've seen how it intervened in so many countries through the intelligence agencies, through force, through various means. Chile, Cambodia, Vietnam, and the endless examples, Korea. So disrupting a lot of the countries. And till today, many of the countries have not got back on a stable path. So the disruption has been enormous beyond USA. Internally in the US also, we are missing out one important point, that the House is very divided. It is divided on a very partisan basis. I sit here and observe the Democrats. I get a large number of messages from the Republicans and from the Democrats, because I'm bipartisan. I'm not for either party, but for US interest. And I see the divisions. And even November elections, November 2026, when the whole House of the representatives and 1/3 of the Senate is to come up for vote, Republicans are already worried, because Trump has already warned them that you have to become more active. You have to start your election work now, because if we lose the House, I will be impeached. So there is a direct threat of that also. Besides what Professor Nalapad mentioned about the economy, etc., those are important factors. So the internal factors are also going to overtake this decision making at some time.
Right,
absolutely. The external factors are already in front of the world. So it's not going to be an easy process as we move ahead. Thank you, Megha.
Absolutely. How confident is Europe in standing on its own 2 feet and sustain itself without the help and support of America? That's the big question. That has been made amply clear in the speech that has been made by US President Donald Trump, saying that you're completely reliant on America. I can tariff you no end, and you can't really resist, because you will have to fall in line or fall out, as was the example that he shared of the French president and the 200% tariffs that he asked Emmanuel Macron to impose on those prescription drugs. So that's one of the many examples that Trump likes to boast about in the way of in the process in which he has been able to coerce these nations, including Europe and specifically France, because he has that love-hate relationship with Emmanuel Macron, and the example that he gave in his speech. I'm out of time, but I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast, sharing your views. Keep a close eye on NewsX as we continue to track all the developments coming in from Davos. Of course, the biggest event of the program was US President Donald Trump's speech, which has been made. What are going to be the consequences of it? We'll keep a close eye. Thanks for watching.